Welcome to Chabad YouTube. I just felt very inspired tonight. It's Hey Tevis. Well, it's concluding. And Rav Chaikin, who's the Rav of Cleveland, Ohio, he said one thing that everyone should do, there's a mitzvah for every Jew, is to write a Sefer Torah. But, it's not so easy. And during the time of Hey Tevis, the Rebbe said that we in a way fulfill this mitzvah by buying Sforim. I mean, I got this book a little while ago, but something I'm struggling with here, time after time, or I'm trying to at least increase and improving, is davening. Like in certain times I can daven almost like a malach, like an angel, and be very inspired and everything. And then other times it's very difficult for me to feel that way. It's a battle. So I'm going through Ein Yaakov. It's volume 2 because that's what I have for Berochos. It's usually from 30b to 64a. And I'm just going to start off this Mishnah. Chapter 5, Daf 30b. The Mishnah discusses how a person should prepare for the Shemona Esrei prayer. Ein yomdim lispalel ela mitoich koived roish uchuli. Ein yomdim lispalel ela mitoich koived roish v'chuli. A person should not stand up to pray the Shemona Esrei without a spirit of reverence, literally heaviness of the head. The pious people of earlier times would wait for 1 hour after coming to their place of prayer and then pray, so they should direct their hearts to their Father in heaven. So I wanted to go through this. There's notes in here. Although the Mishnah says simply, Ein yomdim lispalel, a person should not stand up to pray, it is discussing specifically Shemona Esrei. And that might be the reason why when it comes to davening, like Shachars every day, the morning prayer, one doesn't just go straight to Shemona Esrei, but they have to build up to it. And when you do the morning blessings, and when you do the karbonos, and then you do Shir D'Zimra, the songs, the Tehillim, and all that stuff leading up to it, and then the Shema, the brachas of Shema, and then Shema. It takes a while to get up to Shemona Esrei, and this is to fulfill what it's saying, that a person should not stand up to pray Shemona Esrei without the spirit of reverence. So, insight, the proper mood for prayer. The Mishnah instructs us to foster in ourselves a heaviness of head, a spirit of reverence before davening. The Brisa says that we should not daven from a state of sorrow or laziness, laughter, chatter, lightheadedness, or idle conversation. Seemingly, the Brisa is words and teachings of the Tanoim, those that wrote down the Mishnah Torah. So it's either in a Brisa or a Mishnah right now. It says, seemingly the Brisa considers these states to be antithetical to the Mishnah's spirit of reverence. Now we can easily understand that laughter, chatter, etc. are incompatible with reverence. But why sorrow or laziness? How do these run counter to a spirit of reverence? In a lengthy discourse on tefillah, Rabbi Chaim Friedlander answers this question with a profound psychological insight. The human mind is naturally active. It does not remain empty, but races from one thought to the next. For those that learn Chassidus, this is what the Rebbe talks about in the Maimer Mayim Rabim. So it could be when one's davening, his mind is running from one thought through the next, and the Rebbeim consider this to be the Mayim Rabim, the waves of Tirdos HaParnasa. They're constantly having their worries or thoughts of things that aren't related to the davening or the study of Torah when it comes to studying Torah, and it's very difficult for them. So nevertheless, you have to remove your mind from this before you daven. Unless a person continuously occupies his mind with positive, meaningful thoughts, his mind will naturally be filled with shallow, empty ones. Rabbi Yehuam Levovitz, the Mirror Mashgiach, explains that heaviness of head is the state in which the mind is filled with weighty, substantial thoughts of Torah, spirituality, and personal growth. Now, this is the reason why Chabad Hasidim, they will learn Hasidus before davening. They'll get that heaviness of head. They'll have substantial thoughts. They'll get an awe of Hashem before they daven. And when you have that proper awe, then you could daven and get that feeling, that proper state of mind, even before Shemona Esrei. You could get that feeling at Hodu, the beginning of davening. Such thoughts will properly focus a person both in mind and body, and he will be able to concentrate on Hashem and his prayers without distraction. Without these weighty thoughts, the mind will be at the mercy of empty thoughts of personal desire and gain, and the person will not be able to properly stand before Hashem in prayer. All of the negative moods of our Baraisa revolve around this theme. The first, sorrow, which is atzvus in Hebrew, is not referring to the appropriate degree of concern we should have that we are not living up to our potential and serving Hashem. Indeed, such a feeling should not be grounds for sadness at all. There is never room for sadness in our relationship with Hashem. We should always view life positively. That whatever our current level, we can always improve and grow closer to Hashem. See, I feel a real misnagid is always going to be thinking about how we're in Golas, and he's going to be depressed, and he's always going to be sad about the situation. He's going to be thinking about what's going on in the world. But a chassid knows that just as because a chassid will know that even though we're in Golas, and we're in exile and everything, which was decreed by Hashem, a chassid knows that Mashiach is coming closer and closer, and he's going to be happy. And a chassid knows that everything that Hashem does is good, which is another reason he's going to be happy. So a chassid is never going to let the world and life events bring him down. Okay. So indeed, such a feeling should not be the grounds for sadness at all. There's never room for sadness in a relationship with serving Hashem, or anything with Hashem. We should always view life positively, that whatever our current level, we can always improve and grow closer to Him. Rather, sorrow, atzvus, is a form of depression and of self-absorption. A person becomes sorrowful when he is dissatisfied with his life and preoccupied with his upsets. Such a person's mind is filled with himself, with all his worries and frustrations. And this leaves little room for Hashem and the serious reverential frame of mind required for prayer. Again, this is Yeshus. When a person is filled with himself, based on what I've been learning from Hechaltzu, which Metz Hashem every Sunday I continue to keep doing. I have a share on Zoom, and I'm trying to make a share every week on Sunday. Hechaltzu is the mimer on a Havis Yisrael. Anyways, I'm rambling off. When it comes to loving your fellow Jew, when it comes to loving Hashem, you can't have yeshus, selfishness. You have to leave room for others. You have to leave room for Hashem. When you think only about yourself, then you can't think about your fellow Jew. When you think only about yourself, you can't daven, you can't serve Hashem. And when you're only thinking about yourself, it's going to be negative towards you as well, because you're going to be sad, you're going to be angry, you're not going to be content with life, you're going to be mad that you don't have things your way, and it's just a downward spiral of serving Hashem. That's of not serving Hashem. You're serving yourself. You're serving the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. You're doing what the Satan wants. And the truth is, you need to get rid of your selfish attitude and have a sense of humility and draw closer to Hashem, draw closer to your fellow Jews. You got to learn Torah, you got to daven. Just not everything's about you. You got to think of the bigger picture. Rather, sorrow, atzvus, is a form of depression and of self-absorption. A person becomes sorrowful when he is dissatisfied with his life and preoccupied with his upsets. Such a person's mind is filled with himself, with all his worries and frustrations, and this leaves little room for Hashem and the serious, reverential frame of mind required for prayer. The second state mentioned by the Baraisa, laziness, is likewise incompatible with a serious mindset. Focusing one's mind on consequential thoughts requires conscious effort. A lazy person who expends no such effort will have a mind whose void becomes filled with empty and meaningless thoughts. Rather than the heavy load required for proper prayer, he will be lightheaded and perpetually distracted. So a person that's lazy and is lightheaded, he'll be davening and he'll think, "Oh, look at squirrel. Oh, look at this," and he's just not going to be able to tune into what's going on. The other negative moods of the Brisa all follow the same theme. Laughter, chatter, lightheadedness, and idle conversation are all symptomatic of a mind devoid of spiritual content. When a person fails to focus on meaningful thoughts, his mind and his speech will become filled with all sorts of shallowness and frivolity. How do we develop a proper mindset for prayer and fill our minds with substance? The Brisa below, 31a, explains by involving ourselves in the joy of a mitzvah. When we perform a mitzvah with joy, or as Rashi explains, when we read words of consolation from the Torah, our souls become sated with real and enduring meaning, and we acquire an inner sense of happiness and fulfillment. Words of consolation from the Torah likewise engender in us an uplifting sense of Hashem's closeness to us. At that point, focusing on meaningful thoughts will no longer require effort. We will naturally be drawn towards sanctity and true reverence, and we will focus fully on our prayers in the one before whom we stand. Sifsei Chaim Midos Va'avodas Hashem, Volume 2, Va'dim 10 and 11, pages 206 to 215. Now, inside B, preparing for prayer. The version of the Mishnah presented in the contemporary editions of the Gemara and in Ein Yaakov, Kadesh Sheyechavnu Labam La'avihem Sheba Shemayim, so that they should direct their hearts to their Father in heaven. In other words, they would spend the time clearing their minds of distracting thoughts, so they might concentrate solely on communicating with their Father in heaven. Several commenters, however, follow a version that reads, "Kedei sheyichavnu labam lamakim," so that they should direct their hearts to Hashem, referred to as makim, literally the place, since He is the place of the world. Unlike all of the other creatures, for whom the world is their place, Bereshis Rabbah 68:9. See below. Rabbeinu Yoina sees great significance in this wording. It shows that the pious of earlier times were seeking not merely to concentrate on the words they were saying, but to enter a special frame of mind that is appropriate to prayer. A frame of mind in which the only important concern is to serve Hashem, to the complete exclusion of attaining worldly pleasures. When one diverts his mind from the futile pursuits of this world and focuses single-mindedly on Hashem's greatness instead, he will negate all his previous aspirations for worldly attainments and aspire solely to develop a relationship with Hashem. And in that case, his prayers will earn Hashem's favor and be readily accepted. This idea elaborates Rabbi Chaim Friedlander, Sifsei Chaim Midos Va'avodas Hashem, Volume 2, pages 109 to 201, is reflected by the reference to Hashem, Makoim. The place of a thing is what gives it the ability to exist. For something that has no place in the world cannot exist. Hashem, however, needs no external support for his existence, and thus it is impossible to say that the world is his place. On the contrary, he is the place of the world. He supports the existence of the world and everything in it. Nefesh HaChaim 3:1-1-3. This then is what it means to direct one's heart to the Muklim, to internalize the idea that Hashem himself, along with all our efforts to serve him, such as through prayer, is our only source of existence in the world. One who prays in this way will feel that the act of prayer helps him find his place in the world, and that the true aim of his existence is to elevate himself to a lofty spiritual plane and rise out of the depths of material matters by dedicating himself to serving Hashem. In a well-known pasuk, the Tur 98 follows Rabbeinu Yonah's approach. Indeed, the pious of earlier times and men of good deeds would seclude themselves and concentrate on their prayer until reaching the point at which they would shed their physical orientation and empower their intellectual spirit to rule their entire beings, in the process coming close to the level of prophecy. Pnei Yoshua maintains that according to this approach, the proper time to contemplate these ideas is not during the prayers, but before the prayers, as a way of readying oneself to pray in a suitable frame of mind. Although he acknowledges that the language used by Tur indicates otherwise. Slach draws another lesson from the reference to Hashem as the Makim. Since Hashem is the place of the world, his presence is close at hand, no matter where a person may find himself. As a result, we address Hashem directly in our prayers, such as when we say, "Blessed are you, Hashem," etc. This realization that we are always standing before Hashem's presence should instill in our hearts a pervading sense of humility and submission, as is appropriate for a small, insignificant being standing before the Almighty Master of the universe. On the other hand, continues Slach, the practice of speaking to Hashem in the second person, as if one were speaking to a fellow human being, is liable to reduce the awesomeness of Hashem's presence in one's mind. The Mishnah cautions us against this pitfall by using the word la muklim, to the muklim. For this word has the same numerical value, gematria, as the word gevura, might, each of which adds up to 216. This parallel constitutes a reminder never to forget about Hashem's surpassing might, even while speaking to him in the familiar second-person style of the prayers. This, too, is the idea that behind the sage's statement that wherever you find mention of the might of the Holy One, blessed be He, you will also find mention of His humility. Biblical references to Hashem's humility, explained slach, are liable to weaken the awe we have for Him. These references are therefore invariably accompanied by descriptions of His greatness, allowing us to come away with a balanced view of the divine reality. So now the Gemara is going to discuss this. The Gemara discusses the source of this law. Minah, Hane, Milei, Vichuli. From where is this law derived? What law are we talking about? That when before davening, one should not stand without a spirit of reference. We're talking about the Shemona Esrei. So where do we learn that you shouldn't have a spirit of reverence prior to davening Shemona Esrei? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Eliezer said, for the verse says about Hannah, who was childless and was praying for a son, and she was bitter of spirit, and she prayed to Hashem. The verse tells us what her mood was before praying. This teaches that we too must be in a serious frame of mind when praying. The Gemara asks, from where do we know this? Perhaps Hannah was different, for she was especially bitter of heart. The Gemara offers a different source. Rather, Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, it is derived that which David HaMelech said here. As for me, through your abundant kindness, I will enter your house. I will bow down toward your holy sanctuary in awe of you, in Tehillim 5:8. Thus we learn that we must approach prayer with awe. The Gemara challenges this source as well. From where do you know this? Perhaps David was different, for he would bring much pain upon himself when pleading for mercy. The Gemara offers yet another source. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, we derive it from here. Bow down before Hashem in holy splendor. Behadras Kodesh, Tehillim 29:2. When expounding this verse, do not read it as Behadras in splendor, but rather as Becherdas, in awe. We thus see that prayer must be recited with awe. The Gemara challenges this too. From where do you know this? In fact, I will tell you that the word hadras is to be read exactly as it is written, and it means in splendor. And it is teaching that we should adorn ourselves in preparation for prayer, as was the practice of Rav Yehuda, who would dignify himself by putting on his finest clothing and would then pray. Well, this brings up another thing. When one davens, many Hasidim, they will wear not just a yarmulke and tzitzis, but they will have, in Chabad, they have a fedora hat and a suit. And other Hasidim, they'll have a shtreimel, and they have a bekesher for Shabbos. And they dress in their finest clothes for Shabbos. And many will do this, at least some of these actions, just on a weekday davening. They'll wear the hat and the jacket and the gartel when you're married. Those not married, may Hashem find them a shidduch soon. And they dress in splendor. So he's saying that it's not that you're davening with awe, but you're davening with splendor. The truth is, they're both right. It's just they're trying to find which exact point in the Torah, which exact verse is where you learn to daven with awe, and they're debating which verses stating that one should have awe before davening. And the fact is, you should have awe for Hashem, and because Hashem is the King of all kings, in fact, no thought can grasp him, you should be in awe of him in your finest clothing, because you are standing before the Great One. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. Rather, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. I can't just knock down the phone. Rather, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, "It is derived from here, serve Hashem with awe and rejoice with trembling." Tehillim 2:11. The Gemara now turns to the second part of that verse that appears to contradict itself. My vigilu birada v'chuli. What is meant by and rejoice with trembling? Out of awe of Hashem. Even when it is proper to rejoice, such as performing a mitzvah, the joy must be combined with awe so that it should not cause a person to concentrate on worldly pleasures. The Gemara brings several incidents. Okay. Let me see. Let me go back. Rather, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, "It is derived from here, serve Hashem with awe and rejoice with trembling." This is Tehillim, Capital 2, verse 11. The Gemara now turns to the second part of that verse that appears to contradict itself. My vigilu birada v'chuli. What is meant by and rejoice with trembling? Rav Ada Bar Masna said, in the name of Rabbah, in a place of rejoicing, that is where there is to be trembling. Out of awe of Hashem, when there is proper, even when it is proper to rejoice, such as when performing a mitzvah, the joy must be combined with awe so that it should not cause a person to concentrate on worldly pleasures. The Gemara brings several incidents that relate to this thing. Rabbi Yirmiyah was sitting before Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera saw that Rabbi Yirmiyah was excessively joyful. Rabbi Zera told him, "It is written, in all sorrow there is gain." Mishle 14:23, meaning that a person will be rewarded for maintaining a sorrowful appearance. Why do you appear so joyful? Rabbi Yirmiyah responded, "I am wearing tefillin, which testify that I am subject to Hashem's rule. Thus it is clear that I did not cast off the heavenly yoke, even though I appear joyful." Abaye was sitting before Rabbah. Rabbah noticed that Abaye was excessively joyful and appeared to have cast off the yoke of heaven. Rabbah told him, "It is written, and rejoice with trembling." Abaye replied, "I am wearing tefillin." The next section of the Gemara from 30b appears in Ein Yaakov. So that's basically, I wanted to get into this because I'm gonna summarize it very quickly. When it comes to davening, you should have your mind directed towards Hashem. You shouldn't just wake up in the morning and daven. I don't know, in my community a lot of people do that. I don't know. That's what they do. They wake up. It's Modeh Ani, morning brachas. They daven. And that's it. But maybe the davening is naturally set up that way because davening before the Shemona Esrei gets the mind that way. But the problem is, if you're rushing to go to work, you're just saying through a whole bunch of lines of davening as fast as you can, and you're rushing to that minyan. You're rushing through it, and then you're just getting through every line. You're saying all the Kaddishes, and it's robot service. It's lip service. It's very mechanical, and it's not really true. I mean, it's not truly effective. Whereas if one would daven properly, what he would do is he would have awe for Hashem. I really prefer the approach of Chabad, the way that the Rebbeim instituted it, which is you wake up in the morning, you do your morning blessings, because that's halacha. You say Shema, because you have to say Shema within the right time frame. Because when you do the whole Chabad process, you might not finish on time for Shema. And even if you do this approach early, and one would join a minyan before work, still the process for preparing for work would be very long and tedious, because how does one do this? He wakes up in the morning, then he will say morning Berochos, he will say Shema. He will go to mikveh and make sure he's clean before he davens. He'll put on his clothes, he'll have his talis on if he's married, he'll have his when he gets to the right point, he'll have his tefillin on. And before he even does this, a person's going to learn Chassidus, and he's going to contemplate the greatness of Hashem before he davens. And then he's going to have the right mindset before he davens. He's going to go straight from Hodu all the way through the Shir Zimra. And then he's going to go through the brachas of Shema. And then he's going to say Shema. And if someone's really doing this properly, the complete avodah, he's going to answer amen to the Kadeshim. But he's not going to be in a rush with a worker's minyan. He's going to answer amen because he has to. And if he's not rushed for work, then he's going to contemplate on every single word he's saying. First, before the minyan, he's going to have the right emotions to daven. He's going to be dressing in splendor, in nice, clean clothes. He's going to be purified from the mikveh. And it's a lot of work, so he's going to eat a snack or something, so he has the energy to do this long davening, not this 2-second tefillah. But he's going to go through the whole thing, and he's going to say the words word for word. He's going to answer amen just so he can be with the congregation. And you're not davening to a clock. You're davening to Hashem. So we're talking about somebody that has a day off. Let's say it's a Monday, a Tuesday, or a Shabbos in Yom Tov. And he doesn't have to worry about his family pressuring him to be somewhere. And it's just him and the Eibishter. Someone could be doing this because he's like Hannah. He or she is like Hannah. They really want a child. Or a single bacher, kind of like myself. He's in his 30s. He has all his problems, and he's davening. He's pleading for Hashem. Stop being single and stop being a bacher. And then someone that's having problems with his wife, he's going to daven to Hashem for shalom bayis. But the truth is, we're learning right here that someone that's truly going to be answered isn't thinking about himself and his worries and his own issues. He's going to think about connecting to Hashem. That's what the Chassidus brings up. You're going to connect to Hashem. And then when you connect to Hashem, your heart is going to be just about you and the Avishur. Not the clock, not the minyan, not any of that. You're going to do that because when you daven together, it makes your tefillah better. But it's you and the Avishur. It's not even you, it's the Avishur. You're one with the Avishur. And then you're going to get a sense of joy because you're supposed to have fear and awe at the same time. And this is the special tefillah. If one could do this on a daily basis, wow. I want to really do this I'd love to do this every day. It's difficult. Like, this is the reason Chabad will eat before davening, because we're not davening as soon as we can so that way we can eat. We're going to eat. We're going to have the energy to do this intense avodah in our davening, this intense davening. We're connecting and cleaving to Hashem. And then when it gets to the bracha of Shema Kolenu, the one that hears all prayers, once we did everything about connecting to Hashem, now you have time to daven for your health, for your family. And once you did, and before this you did tshuva, you were confessing to Hashem your averas, and you don't want to do that anymore. So in the Shemona Esrei, your mind is in the right state, and you're going through each and every level. It's gewaldic. I did this one time in my life. It was Yotes Kislev. I don't know if I did it everything perfectly because there's just so much to do, but I at least went from Hodu to Ach Sadikim in this, where I said every single word in Hebrew, and I had everything in English, and I was davening for my brother. And mamash, last week I had a miracle that I found out he was alive when I could have sworn he was not alive. I had so many doubts. He wasn't on social media, and when he's always on social media, he was doing things that made me think he was not alive. It was mamash leading up to the parsha where Yosef is found out to be alive from his brothers when his father for sure thought he was dead. It turns out my brother's name's Yosef. So anyways, I was davening Yotes Kislev and with such intensity, and then I found out he's alive. So it's not joking in here in Ein Yaakov when one really davens be'emes, he could be answered. So I strongly recommend. You can't do this every time, all the time. One does not have the time. My Mishpia told me you can't do this. It's good to do this if you have the time to. So one that is free, one that has a day off, and no pressure on him, he should do this as much as possible. If he has spare time, give up your Netflix. Give up your spare browsing the internet thing. Give up your spare time to do whatever you do it as a hobby. And just add 1 minute more, 2 minutes more into your davening and have a complete connection with Hashem. Just 1 minute at a time, and daven be'emes as much as you can. I really believe that if we would do this more, our prayers would be answered. We'd have less problems, and Mashiach would be here. We have to daven be'emes, everything, acknowledging Hashem, how great He is with the Chassidus, and do everything like this. I think I want to try it. I don't have work tomorrow. I want to try it. I've done averas that I'm not happy about, and that might be the reason I'm still single. And we should just daven. Don't just go through the motion like a robot. Like, open up the siddur and daven in your language. If one doesn't know how to read Hebrew, daven in Spanish, daven in Chinese. Pray to God, connect to God with whatever language you do. Although the best way is to daven in Hebrew. So what I do, and I recommend those that know how to read Hebrew but don't know the language of Hebrew, is to get the translinear edition and say the words in Hebrew but have in mind in English. That'll be the best tefillah one could ever have. On this Hey Tavis, or going into Vav Tavis, may the redemption of the books lead us to learn more Torah, connect with the Avishter and daven more, and may we all receive everything we need, physically and spiritually. And one thing I truly learned, to sum it up, is not only are we in Golus, but Hashem is in Golus. Because Hashem is in this predicament where he wants the redemption to come from us. He wants us to choose him and to build his house and to build the Beis HaMikdash. He wants us to choose him over all the pleasures and desires of the world. And he wants us to choose with our own freedom of will to cleave to him. And he wants us to do this, and when we do this, he will show us the rewards of Avram Avinu, who got all the riches he could ask for, Yitzchak and Yaakov, and Moshe Rabbeinu. He wants to show us his glory, and when we cleave to him, we will get everything we could have ever asked for. May Mashiach be revealed, Tekefa miyad mamish, speedily in our days. Mashiach now.